Hey guys, what's up? It's me, AZODi, and today I'm going to show you how to write a K-pop song in the style of ITZY. So in this video, we're going to be breaking down the elements that make a song sound like ITZY. We're going to talk about how to get that memorable ITZY bass line, the girl crush elements used in sound design, and general ear candy elements that make the song sound much more memorable and interesting. So I'm in the process of editing my very first K-pop production course for beginners. If you would like to be one of the first group of people to be notified when the K-pop beginner production course goes live, download those free K-pop MIDI chords and I will email you when it is time. If you would like me to produce one of your own custom-made tracks or remix one of your existing tracks, please email me from the email address below. So here are some general basics to make the track sound ITZY. There is always a grey area, but this is a great place to start. You want it about 115 to 130 beats per minute, or you can make it half-time, 65 BPM plus, etc. for the trap beats. Not Shy is a good example of this. You want it in a minor key, garage and house presets and samples for the bass and kit. Girl crush sound design elements like girl yells and haze. Verse to rap section, and you want to be able to add a dance break, ideally around the bridge, middle 8. So this is actually taken from an ITZY mixed with DREAMCATCHER remix I did a few weeks ago. I'm going to do it in order of the elements that I think are most important for this style of track. So the first element that I wrote was the bass line. This set the premise for the entire song. So let's have a listen. Very minimal, very simple, but off the bat it already starts to sound like ITZY. So let me just dive into the preset here. As mentioned before, I used Serum and I got the bass sample from Sample Magic, which would have been downloaded from SPLICE, and the bass is just called Garage. Very simple. There's not really too much anything too wild here. I am just moving down the chord of the root note. If we dive in a little bit closer, the shape is practically the same here. And actually I just repeat the melody and just add a little bit. I develop the original theme here and then resolve it here on the fourth if you divide it into 4. Alright, so in regards to signal processing, I didn't really do that much as the source sample preset was great and I didn't really want to shape or change that too much. So in a way you can look at the signal processing as invisible, but it works with the rest of the song. So all I did on the EQ, Fab Filter, just cut off some of the lows, a lot of the highs, and just kind of exaggerated the frequencies that I really liked about that garage preset. Just put it through the Steven Slate virtual channel. Just a bit of H-comp compression here, not super aggressive, kind of just taming it a bit. What I did find with this is the bass preset was a bit wide for my liking. Now, because in the track it's quite spacious, especially in the verse, there's a lot of room. So I reined in the stereo field a little bit just to make it a bit more kind of closed in and sit just on top of the kick. Alright, cool. So one of the fundamentals of ITZY is getting that solid house beat, and I have done something that is not very wild, and it's just the simple 4 to the floor beat. Now I spent a lot of time getting the correct samples that reminded me of house or garage. So let's start with the kick, nice and simple. All it is a 4 to the floor rhythm. And then the same with the snare. Super simple, super easy. I know a lot of you guys who are watching this can do that with no problems. If we want to dive into the little bit of the signal processing, I didn't want to shape the sound too much, so it's quite minimal because I spent the time getting the sample right. So as you can see here, we've got just the Steve Slate virtual channel, just a bit of earth or low end. I like using the H-comp compressor as it does a lot of the hard work and graft, so I don't think it's too aggressive. It's fairly aggressive, yeah, just to rein it in a bit. And then I use the EQ kind of to bring out the lows, and wanted to enhance the sort of brightness and attack of that kick. Bit of saturation, distortion, you know, just to kind of color the sound a bit around here. As you can see, it's relevant to around this. Nothing too wild, bit tube. And then I use the CLA2 to kind of round it off, and I really like the CLA2 as I see it as more of a invisible compressor, so it doesn't change the sound too much, but it kind of rounds stuff off nicely. Works great with vocals as well. So yeah, and then just a bit transient, you know, just attack. Let's have a look at the snare, and the snare's barely got anything on it. Yep. So again, just the attack, the brightness, kind of a bit of the low end for the clap, because the claps can sound a little bit thin. Have a listen with it on. I like those hand claps as it reminds me of something you would hear in a house track. Yeah, again, CLA2, nothing too wild or compressed here. Invisible compressor. And yeah. Oh, I've actually dialed up the attack a fair bit on this. I think maybe because the clap was sounding a little bit weak by itself. With it off. On. So it's barely noticeable, you know. Cool, so here are the hats. I just got a sample from Splice. Didn't really matter. I think I had a sample lying around, and I just used the hi-hat setting from the virtual mix rack and then tweaked accordingly to my taste. Yeah, again, didn't really need too much, just general brightening on the EQ spectrum with hi-hats. So generally when I'm producing, I'm pretty obsessed with developing themes and ideas, and generally as a rule of thumb, if something's going to repeat after 4 bars, then it's a good time to introduce something new, and it could be small, it can be big, but generally it's just about unveiling new elements gradually as the song progresses. And if you've watched any of my reactions, I talk about that a lot, about developing themes and ideas, and in my own productions no different. So for example here we've got a percussion and it repeats, and I just introduce it halfway just to show development. So let's have a listen to the track and pay attention to this percussion here. Just real simple. Now that the bass and the low ends are pretty much covered in the verse, I kind of wanted to fill out the mid frequencies. Now, as you know, with kick and bass, generally it's dead center, so there's a lot of space sitting around the sides here. So what I did is, this is one of my favorite presets, and I use this all the time. And I think it's from a free preset from Kpop Music, Austin Hull, and it's the Dream Killer, and it's this kind of creepy, spacious sort of pluck. So I went for more of a mystery vibe. Even though the emotion generally you want the girl crush thing, I felt that girl crush and maybe an element of mystery could work quite nicely. Let's have a listen. Solo them. Cool. I put Pancake on. This is a free plugin you can grab, and all I've done is I'm panning the pluck from left to right so it can really fill out that stereo field. Gentle sidechain compression from Shaperbox. We've got some EQ here just to kind of enhance the bright pluck sound and pull away some of the mids and lows. So all I did here was duplicated the Nightmare pluck, treated it exactly the same, but I used something from Contact called Cinematic Keys, piano with quite a sharp attack, so it would kind of sit on top of the Nightmare pluck. All I've done is treat them exactly the same, but 2 different layers blended together like that. All right, cool. So let's have a listen to the A chorus. Now with this chorus, I heavily reference Dalla Dalla by ITZY, and I'll explain to you what I did for this one. Introduce subtle new elements to kind of lift the chorus and make it clear and different from the verse 1. Just add a freaking tambourine, man. You're just gonna add a tambourine. Real simple. Nothing too wild there. Crash as well, and I think I love this crash because it is nasty. Have a listen to this crash that I use. pretty vicious, right? I like using that crash. Provides a great impact as well with all the other layers, so I really like using that. Just simple ride beat, nothing too wild. I just thought it was a cool element to add. Let's have a listen to what I did with the bass. Yeah, quite a bit going on here. Cool, so the main bass is this one here. So what I'm doing is I'm accenting each of the chord changes. As you can see here, it's changing along with the chord. But I chose a sample that sounded like that cutting bass that you hear in Dalla Dalla. And if you notice with Dalla Dalla, they hit the chord, but then they'll do a load of like 16th notes just before the chord to give it that kind of almost like glitching effect in a way, because you're kind of putting loads of notes together and it sounds slightly artificial, but it's a cool effect at the same time. There's quite a lot of space still, even though we accent with that one first bass, there's this space here for other things to fly in. And a lot of production is about filling spaces with different elements that make it sound very pleasing to the ear. But the trick is you can't have them sitting over each other, otherwise it starts to sound messy. If we dive in a bit deeper here, you can see that it hits here and it starts to ring out, and as soon as it rings out, I fill it with a bass slap note, and then there's some space here, and then I'll add like, say, another one shot. And this is how I really get into like the intricate sort of side of bass. And then I've got a subtle 808 bass note just hitting softly, just to help with the impact. And have a listen to how they don't actually sit on top of each other. So listen out. Listen to the slap notes here. It sounds okay, but what I did is I created the effect of it muting. So if you were to slap a bass, you'd get your bone side of your thumb and you'd hit it down. But what it does is it creates this staccato, sharp, quick note. And I use it more in a rhythmic sense than a melodic sense. I've made the note so short, it sounds like it's being hit with your thumb, like how a bass player or a funk bass player would play it. So now listen. Yeah, bass one shot here. Yeah, it's just like nothing. One thing that happened is when the vocal came in, I found that I made the bass a little bit too aggressive on the top end because I really wanted to enhance that sort of biting effect. Ran it past a few friends and they called it out, but basically it was too distracting and interfering with the vocal. So what I did was I cut off below 6K, just above 5K. Trap horns, nothing too wild here. That's just to cover the low mid frequencies when the song comes in. Just accenting the downbeat and the start, you know, the E note here. Let's have a listen to the mids. So as you can hear, I've added 3 different layers to the chords. We've got the saw chord, which is kind of the bright chord. EQ wise, nothing too wild. Yeah, just treated it like a super saw lifter from the Future Bass preset, the Infinity EQ, and then tweaked accordingly. Kind of get the real brights out and pull off a lot of the low. And they're kind of treated as the main forefront chord, let's say. And then I've got this high chord, Noble preset from a free pack of cymatics for Serum. And then this was treated more like an even brighter one. It's cool because it kind of sits in the background, and I know as a preset it sits quite well with my saw chord preset. And then I've got this kind of low mid, so you've got kind of a mid one, you've got a high one, and then I kind of do a low mid one. Yeah, it kind of brought the color out and a bit of the fatness. You can hear it it's got a nice attack and it's kind of low mid. So I've got 3 different layers for the chords all following each other. This is something that I use a lot of and it really helps drive the rhythm, just like a guitar muted picking note, but it's always playing the root note of the chord. Cool, and all I do is I jump in, edit the audio, and make sure each time the chord changes, right, it's hitting E for the E chord. And as you can see, it's hitting the F sharp, so when it changes to the F sharp chord there, and then if I jump on there, G sharp, and it's in line. And all you're doing is just lining up the chords. It's an Oliver sample which you can download from Splice. He's really good at retro sort of funk stuff and 80s vibes, which is really cool, and disco. Cool, right, let's move into the repeated section. Not so much a B chorus, but it's the A chorus repeated with development. I like to add some sort of hook where I can. So let's have a listen to this weird hook that I've created to show development. Yeah, it's kind of weird. The trick is with hooks, really, in my experience, is less is more is a big part of that melodically. You kind of don't want to go past maybe 4 or 5 notes if possible, because it's just easier for the human ear to remember it off the bat after a first listen. Yeah, and yeah, again, I'm not really doing anything too wild here. There's barely any notes being played, and I imagine these notes are able to sit over each of the chord changes nicely. And then what I would do is layer it up. So all I've done is created a layer doing exactly the same, but I tend to layer stuff quite a lot, especially in the chorus. Oh yeah, I know what I did here. All I did was I take a cymbal from Splice, I think it's a China cymbal, dropped it into the sampler. Like that, and yeah, just turned it into a hook, turned it into a riff, and I used it as an interesting layer to sit behind the other one. And you can hear the cymbal kind of hits the lower side of the riff or hook, and then you've got the higher one sitting on top. Okay, so let's move into the verse 2 rap section, which is a solid ITZY part and general K-pop part. Cool. All right. So verse 2, we treat it like a brand new section. I really wanted to portray a lot of hype in this section and get some real exciting emotion, because verse 2 generally isn't as important as the chorus, but I still wanted to keep the energy up. What did I do here? Right. So off the bat, you can see it's a completely brand new drum beat. I changed the kick pattern so it wasn't doing 4 to the floor anymore. I think I switched up the hats. Yeah. So we got brand new hats as well, which is much more reminiscent of trap. Cool. I switched up into a brand new snare. Let's have a listen. Nice. Which is cool. I treated it like a regular snare drum, but I just changed the sample up. This is one of my favorite things to do in verse 2, is to use this sort of snare sound, because it just sounds so different from the rest of the song, and it's very apparent and obvious to the listener that it is different, completely different, you know. And I've actually layered it up. This is another trick I like doing, is when I want to do something aggressive like this, I will layer it up with literally a metal bang or iron. Now this is from Spitfire Albion. This is very orchestral based Contact library, but I just love the sound it makes. So have a listen. This is that. Sounds horrible, doesn't it? All I do is layer that up beneath the verse 2 snare. Have a listen. It's nice, isn't it? Just sounds so aggressive. I love it. So we do the trap part, which is the first half of verse 2. And then what I do is I bring the listener back to verse 1, but the second half. But instead of just doing a repeat of the second half of verse 1, I switch it up again and add a cheeky little sort of rhythmic thing. So have a listen anyway. Listen to what I do with the drums. Back in again, but now listen. Cheeky, right? Yeah, just I'm obsessed with keeping it interesting. I'm obsessed with developing themes and ideas. You really want to portray the girl crush element, and I find if it's not being covered in the vocal so much, you can do it in the sound design. So let's have a listen to what I did with the sound design here. First thing you hear is this Let's Go sample. So for me, that sample alone is so exciting. It just sounds really cool. Let's go! I love it. Absolutely love it. Now, this is something that I do with a lot of my girl crush productions when I'm pitching to the labels is I love sampling scenes and sound design, because sound design can really take your production to the next level. It can really paint a picture before a single note of music is played. So I tend to do it a lot in the introduction. I like it to be one of the last things the listener hears, so I'll do it in the ending as well. But with Girl Crush, because it's attitude, because it's biting, it's sort of edgy, I've sampled a riot scene, dip it and sit it back in between the drum beats, because something about hearing the sirens going off and like loads of like commotion and noise going on really enhances that attitude. Use it as white noise as well, because it's covering so much of the frequency. You've got the low ends of the car engines, police cars going off, you've got the sirens which are covering the high end, and then you've got all the voices of people rioting, yelling and shouting and stuff that's sitting in the sides. It covers a lot of the frequencies that potentially the musical elements won't be covering. I just think it just adds so much excitement to the hype. Now, a big fundamental part of Girl Crush is you want the general girl haze, yells, ahs and stuff. So have a listen to this sample I grabbed from Splice. I mean, you couldn't get more ITZY if you tried really with that sound, could you? And then I've got this sound as well, which you can probably hear in Not Shy by ITZY. This thing here. Let's just get you into position. Have a listen. Yeah, it's just fun, girl, edgy, attitude, yelling, shouting, all that good stuff that you want in an ITZY track. Cool, so for the verse 2 bass, yeah, straight up just an 808, nothing too wild. I love using the Anna 2 by Stephen Slate, especially the chunky. There's some good selection of 808s here. So if you go, yeah, so these are all the 808s I tend to use, really great. I find that they just work. They're quite easy to use. If you want to have a look at the chain, yeah, just clean and fat 808 setting there, and I would have tweaked it, really enhanced the lows there. I use my favorite. I love this quadra fuzz, man. It just kind of adds in some nice color, tube saturation to the frequencies. What compressor we got? That would have been for the side chain with the kick. Oh yeah, I got a bit of multi-band going on here. Yeah, I remember what I did here. So you notice like with the 808 you've got the low notes, and then you know where you hear when it jumps up. I find that that jumping up bit really sticks out. So what I did is I tried to tame it a bit with the multi-band compressor here, and you can see how hard it works when it hits that high note. So look at how much this compressor works. You see that? And you can see it working really hard when it hits those high notes. I've developed the trap horn, so I've got the same sample that I used in the chorus, but I created a bit more of a melody here with these. But let's have a listen together. Yeah, filth, right? Absolute aggression. I find they all work together, especially with the Girl Crush samples and the riot stuff. Really cool. And when we go into the second half of verse 2, which is actually verse 1. Yeah, what I do is same bass line as before, but I just get the kick and then like an open hi-hat to accent the bass line. Because I think it's kind of cool, I think it's kind of fun, it's kind of funky. You'd hear that in a funk track almost, you know, that sort of like accenting. So yeah, I just went for it because I thought it sounded cool. Yeah. And we got an added fire alarm, which is great timing, wasn't it? Cool, so another fundamental part that we need to cover, and this will be the last part, is the dance break. ITZY have amazing dance routines, choreography, and you need to compensate that when you're producing an ITZY track. You need to make room for them to create an awesome dance. I took the beat from verse 2. So I've got that nasty iron, that verse 2 snare, same kick pattern, same trap hi-hat pattern. The sound design is quite prominent in this, so let's have a listen. We've got white noise splash to smooth over the transition. Bunch of claps in a big stadium, but it just sounds massive and I absolutely love it. Just fills out the space nicely, you know, like the same reason how I had that riot scene in verse 2. I use it in the chorus and I used it in this dance break is just to fill out the frequencies that weren't being covered by the melodic parts. We've got this sort of attitude. So let's do that again. Cool. Oh, I went pretty 90s with this, and I used this sort of orchestral stab. Nice. And I got some more mid-late 90s hits. What else we got? Oh man, absolutely love it. Oh, we've got some deck scratches here. Oh, classic. And another Kashmir sample. People singing this. Classic. And then I develop it. So even though we got halfway, I bring in the Girl Crush Haze stuff. I do like to add a bit of humor into my productions, so I felt that this was pretty important. I added this. Humor of a 12-year-old. So what have we got for the bass? Let's have a listen. Easy. So I went a bit more to town on the bass slap. And we're just playing around that same chord. Everyone's playing around the same chord, and it's just creative ways of filling the silence with different instruments. And I'm playing it like a bass player. So the longer notes are the notes that I want you guys to hear, and then the shorter notes are rhythmic to kind of give it a good groove and a good flow. Cool. And then when this isn't playing, we've just got simple kind of root notes from the 808, and it's accenting the chords like they're all stabbing together. So I'll show you in the context of the track because it will sound a bit weird on its own. So listen to these bass stabs on the 808 here. See how they've all stacked up with the chords as well. They all layer together. And then just to fill the gap again, silence, I just use a bass 808 drop. Let's have a listen to the mids. Easy, simple. Just using the chords, accenting the stabs, and then to keep the momentum going, to keep it, you know, because there's a lot of space, there's a lot of silence as well, so you kind of want something in the background to keep driving the rhythm. If you're creating tracks and you've got to think of choreography, there generally has to be something always going just to help the dance routine move along, even if it's something subtle like a small hi-hat in the background. But I've just used the guitar mutes. Awesome, and those are the key fundamentals that you need for an ITZY track. If you want to listen to the full track, I'll put a link to the ITZY DREAMCATCHER remix, and you can really listen out to all the ITZY elements behind the song that make it sound ITZY. If you found the video helpful, hit that like and subscribe button as it really helps this channel out. Don't forget, if you want track feedback sessions, hit me up on Twitch, AZODi Music. Thanks so much, and I'll catch you again soon.